Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We're talking about the Greeks. We're talking about the financial crisis that Greece has been experiencing. It seems like forever at this point, and whether or not they're going to stay in the European Union. Doc was enlightening us on some of the things that they want the Greeks to do. Doc, take it away.
All right. Then they had austerity number 3, because keep in mind there's 7 austerity things that they wanted to do. They've had a series of bailouts. There's been 2 very large bailouts, and they're looking for a third one. So the third one is number of publicly owned companies shall be reduced from 6,000 to 2,000. Limit of 500 a month to the 13th and 14th month salaries of public employees. So in other words, they took whatever bonuses it was and said, well, this is what it's going to be. You're still going to get an extra money for those 2 months you don't work, the 13th and 14th month. But, because we get back to that's how socialism works. They create things that nobody else has. 8% cut in public sector allowances. In addition to the 2 previous austerity things, 3% pay cut for DECO, which is public sector utilities employees. Public sector limit of 1,000 euro introduced to biannual bonus abolished entirely for those earning over 3,000 a month. So if you got more than 3,000 a month, you didn't get that bonus. Number of municipalities shall shrink from 1,000 to 400. In other words, they're going to start saying, well, as a town, you don't exist. Now, that one's kind of harsh, I think. Pension reform, have a limit of 800 euro per month at the 13th and 14th month pension installments. That means they still get 1 through 12 months. We're all talking about just the fake months that they've added in there, 13 and 14. Return of a special tax on high pensions, equalization of men's and women's pension age limits. They essentially said, well, we're going to make it all the same, and it's going to be 65. General pension age has not changed, but a mechanism has been introduced to scale them to life expectancy changes. Average retirement age for public sector workers shall be 65. They jammed, and I mean jammed, the VAT tax up. They imposed more taxes on all company profits, rise in the value of properties. In other words, they said, even though we're tanking, we're going to raise everybody's property value so we can tax it more. 10% rise in luxury taxes and sin taxes. 10% additional rise for all imported cars. So you're now talking 40% of your car expense, if it's imported, is going to be outrageous. 40%. Now you might think, oh, you're probably talking, Lamborghinis, whatever. The most popular car in Europe is a Ford Focus. That's what they're importing, right? So Ford Fiesta, Ford Focus are the big ones that are in Europe. Well, that's just, the average working guy suddenly is just going to get pounded, especially if he has a taxi, which is the major way people get around in Europe. The 4th austerity package came in on June 11th. So they privatized and sold government property. They increased the taxes again. They increased the VAT tax again. They increased the, this was for the housing industry. There was an extra tax for those with the yearly income over 12,000 euro. That's 15,000 a year. So if you made over 15,000 a year, you got 2 taxes, it's like Christmas for these socialists, right? An extra tax of 2% for combating unemployment. So everybody got an extra 2% tax. They lowered the payments, the pension payments, period. And then created a special agency responsible for exploiting government property and others. Basically, people were not paying their taxes, and so this is basically their version of the IRS. Then the 5th austerity package passed in February 2012. 22% cut in minimum wage from the current €750 per month. Holiday wage bonuses, this includes the extra months, are permanently canceled. So you finally got rid of that. 150,000 jobs cut by the state in 2015, by 2015. Pension cuts, again, changes to laws to make it easier to lay off workers. Health and defense spending cuts, because they're like our government. Once you hire them, they're in there forever. It doesn't matter what they do. They go on a mass shooting spree and it's, hey, you have to put them on leave.
I don't think that's ever happened, but go ahead.
No, but I'm just saying that's how ridiculous it is. Health and defense spending cuts. Industry sectors given the right to negotiate lower wages based upon economic development. That's just a common sense thing. Opening up closed professions to allow for more competition. So essentially, they would have these favored professions, and nobody else could come in and compete unless you, period, apparently. Privatizations of their utilities. And then that was one of the bailouts. That was 2000. That was one that was definitely needed for 2012 to get the bailout. So the next one is bank recapitalization, tax reform, labor market reform, pension reform. It's basically more of the same kind of stuff, just different numbers, everything else. And the seventh one is pretty much like the rest of them. They just adding more problems. Now, part of the problem with this, Greece doesn't produce anything. They produce nothing. So they don't have the ability to manufacture their way out of it. They don't have anything to sell. I mean, their most important thing are the islands in the Aegean Sea, which does a lot of stuff, tourism. Mm-hmm. But the problem is they've jammed up the VAT tax so high that suddenly they're driving away the one thing that they could have. So they've done a lot of things. Now, fast forward a little bit, this Tsipras guy wins. He goes, hey, we're not gonna pay anything. We don't think these debts are legitimate, even though it's his government that ran them up, supporting this socialist agenda. So the bottom line is now they're in a world of hurt because they're back doing what they should have been doing in the first place. I mean, what a socialist heaven. You don't have to work. If you do work, you get 2 extra months pay. You get paid for leave of absence. You get paid to have babies. You know, there's no competition. Your wages are so high that nobody's going to buy your products. Honest to goodness, if nobody's going to buy your products, then how are you going to be able to work your way out of it? So now the latest thing is, and I read this on Flipboard right before I walked in, what they're going to do is say, well, unless you forgive us our debt, we're not going to be able to pay it off anyway. So we're just going to go back to the drachma.
So you
have a minute to respond to my last 10 minutes of testimony.
Well, no, I was just gonna ask you a follow up about what you think that means for the EU.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be that difficult to figure out what it means for the EU. It turns out that Greece shouldn't have been let in anyway. I think everybody's now starting to realize that. Ireland and Spain have turned it around. They have stuff that they can sell. It's in line with what everybody else has. And they did a lot of these very same austerity measures, except you have to keep in mind their debt ratio wasn't nearly as bad as what this was. I mean, the Greeks borrowed money during the heyday to keep everything going, to keep the free ride going. Well, that's what they did. And when things tightened up, the Europeans stepped in and said, we're willing to help. And the problem is now people in the rest of Europe are like, listen, this isn't working. We're not willing to throw any more money after it because it is now, their debts are $250 billion. And that's a tiny country. I mean, imagine our debt I know we have massive debt, but we're nowhere near what the Greeks are at this moment.
Well, I mean, the thing about austerity for Greece is that it just wasn't something that they could do. I mean, if you were talking about austerity measures, first of all, they've been the most austere in Europe. Greece has been for the last several years, and it just still isn't working. But if you talk about austerity like the way that the British were using it, even though you don't have much in the way of folks behind it, really. I mean, had Labor not been such a dunce this last time, the Cameron government was not popular. It was mainly because of austerity. But, you know, people were still willing to loan the United Kingdom tons of money to support the austerity that they were doing because they were having all these sorts of program cuts and things that they had promised to people. They were buying money to patch the boat on the backs of huge tax cuts for folks that can't really afford it. That's what austerity really is. Now, Greece, and the U.S. did that to a smaller degree, obviously. Now, Greece, no one lent them any money. No one would help them patch the holes, and no one would help them, keep these sort of bridge loans in place.
Well, part of the problem is they had these
the
private loans, and then the IMF, the ECB, and there's another organization all stepped in to give them these loans, but nothing seemed to work. And that's where they're at. I mean, they've thrown good money at them, and now they're like, well, unless you're going to forgive our debts, which they did in 2012, it isn't going to turn around. And the reason is they don't have enough income to bring in, and two, their socialistic endeavors over there are so outrageously expensive they can't afford it. That's all there is to it. We're going to be back right after this break. We're going to finish up with Greece, and then we're going to slide right into Bernie Sanders because we'll still be talking about socialism, and we'll be back right after this break. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.